Hello, this is Claudia, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the May 6th issue of the New York Times and the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump promised transparency in Venezuela, but oil secrets linger. Trump officials and their Venezuelan allies have promised a new era of accountability to unlock Venezuela's immense oil wealth, but the country's oil industry remains a black hole. U.S. and Venezuelan officials have promised a new era of accountability for Venezuela's lucrative oil industry after the downfall of President Nicolas Maduro. President Trump said the United States would control Venezuelan oil sales. Venezuela would submit monthly budgets to the White House, the Trump administration said, and the United States said it hired auditors to check receipts. Venezuela's new leader and Mr. Trump's ally, Delcy Rodriguez, said the public could trace every oil dollar on a new website. None of these initiatives, however, have thus far shed light on where Venezuela's oil money has been going, prompting questions about the political will in Washington and Caracas. Yet even with the best intentions, Washington's plan to show how and where Venezuelans' oil riches are being spent would be a gargantuan task. Decades of plundering have left Venezuela with an opaque and deeply corrupt oil industry, which Ms. Rodriguez has largely failed to solve during her previous role running the national economy. For every $2 that Venezuela earned selling oil earlier this decade, $1 was stolen, internal documents and official statistics show. The stakes are even higher today for Mr. Trump. His plan to unlock Venezuela's massive oil potential with $100 billion of American investment hinges, in part, on convincing U.S. oil executives that his administration can establish the rule of law. For Ms. Rodriguez, assuring Venezuelans that the oil industry, a core part of the country's national identity, benefits many and not just the few, is vital to improving her long odds of winning a competitive presidential election that the United States is pushing for next year. It's unclear how much corruption Ms. Rodriguez would tolerate in order to keep her grip on the government, which remains filled with Mr. Maduro's apparatchiks and their businessmen patrons. During Mr. Maduro's 13-year rule, Venezuela's omnipresent state oil company known as PDVSA has become his family's personal estate, allowing relatives and cronies to sell oil at highly preferential terms. The patronists grease the wheels of the ruling apparatus, ensuring its loyalty to Mr. Maduro, who survived multiple crises before being captured in January by U.S. Special Forces. The OPEC oil trading schemes continued right up to Mr. Maduro's fall, and some beneficiaries have kept quietly doing business with PDVSA under Ms. Rodriguez, according to internal documents and interviews with Venezuelan oil officials and people close to the industry. The questionable deal-making is testing her promise to make a clean break with Mr. Maduro's economic policies, which she has blamed for Venezuela's prolonged financial crisis. These previously unreported documents provide a rare glimpse of the scale of graft during Mr. Maduro's final years, which were shaped by an economic standoff with the United States and mounting repression at home. The documents and interviews also show the central role played by a relative of Mr. Maduro, Carlos Malpica Flores, who several Venezuelan oil officials and industry insiders have described as the guardian of the Maduro's family's wealth. The people interviewed for this article spoke on condition of anonymity to avoid reprisals. The Trump administration imposed sanctions on Mr. Malpica in December, claiming he had facilitated the continued corruption of the Maduro regime. Mr. Malpica did not respond to questions sent through a business partner and to relatives. PDVSA documents show that shell companies controlled by Mr. Malpica and other businessmen close to Mr. Maduro exported oil worth $11 billion in 2021 and 2022 without paying anything to the state company. That amount represented half of all Venezuelans' oil revenues in those 2 years, statistics from the country's central bank show. The off-the-books oil sales appear to have violated Venezuelan law at the time, which gave PDVSA sole custody of the country's oil wealth. Since Mr. Maduro's removal and the imposition of U.S. control of Venezuela's oil exports in January, Mr. Malpica appears to have lost access to crude sales, according to people close to the industry. But the people, as well as a senior Venezuelan oil official, say Mr. Malpica continues profiting from his companies that run oil fields, provide services to PDVSA, and ship oil products locally. Venezuela's government did not respond to requests for comment. The Trump administration declined to comment publicly for this article. An administration official said Venezuela's government was providing commitments that funds were being properly spent. A senior State Department official, Michael Kozak, told Congress last month that the U.S. government hired KPMG, a global financial services firm, to audit Venezuela's oil sales, adding that the firm will provide reports at a later unspecified date. Venezuela's central bank said last week that it separately hired another auditing firm without providing additional details. The story of Mr. Malpica, 53, epitomizes the transformation of the Venezuelan economy into a personal fief of the Maduro family, a system still partly in place despite a leadership change. A former bus driver and union leader, Mr. Maduro, lacked the technical understanding of Venezuela's Byzantine economy when his cancer-stricken mentor and predecessor, Hugo Chavez, bequeathed him the presidential office in 2013. Mr. Maduro needed allies to run the country, and those people needed to be loyal to him, not to Mr. Chavez, a self-styled revolutionary who commanded his followers' adoration. Mr. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, a senior politician in her own right, embarked on creating a new elite. Among Mr. Maduro's recruits was Ms. Rodriguez, a lawyer from a prominent leftist family. Mr. Maduro and Ms. Flores also began appointing dozens of relatives without any apparent qualifications to public posts, where some remain today. One relative was Mr. Malpica, a nephew of the First Lady, who at the start of Mr. Maduro's term convinced the president to let him manage dealings with the oil sector, according to senior officials at the time. Mr. Malpica's career quickly took off. Months after taking power, Mr. Maduro appointed him to the board of Venezuela's development bank, known as Bandes. Soon after, he became the national treasurer and PDVSA's head of finance. The positions gave Mr. Malpica unchecked access to Venezuela's oil wealth, which he continued to exploit after leaving the public sector in 2016 and becoming a PDVSA subcontractor and oil buyer. In late 2022, PDVSA's board met to take stock of years of unpaid oil bills left by Mr. Malpica and other Maduro confidants, according to the meeting's presentation seen by the Times. The board counted nearly 240 oil tankers that left without payment between 2019 and 2022, costing the Venezuelan state $13 billion. The board voted to effectively write that money off, the presentation shows. Months later, Ms. Rodriguez took charge of PDVSA after orchestrating the downfall of her predecessor, Tariq El-Assami, a protege of Mr. Maduro, who is on trial on corruption charges. Under her management, PDVSA's most blatant irregularities, such as unpaid oil sales, largely stopped. But Mr. Malpica and other businessmen close to Mr. Maduro continued receiving preferential access to oil, showing the limits of her initiatives. In 2023, for example, a shell company connected to Mr. Malpica became the second largest exporter of Venezuela's crude, just behind Chevron, a multinational firm that has produced oil in Venezuela for a century, the documents show. Copies of some of the contracts show that the shell company, China-registered Hangzhou Energy, received oil from PDVSA on highly favorable and unusual terms, despite not having any history of business activity. A contract for 2022 shows that Hangzhou was allowed to sell about a tenth of the country's export volumes that year in return for providing the government with an unspecified amount of humanitarian aid. It is unclear how much aid Hangzhou eventually delivered or what is included. Ostensibly set up in the response to American sanctions, oil for food deals similar to the one obtained by Hangzhou became a major source of corruption during Mr. Maduro's final years, siphoning billions of dollars from the state at a time of humanitarian crisis, according to the U.S. government, and investigations by a Venezuelan news outlet, Armando Info. An email to Hangzhou's operations manager, Zhang Juling, went unanswered, though Hangzhou's legal representatives were ostensibly in China. In practice, it was Mr. Malpica and a partner, Ramos Carretero, who represented Hangzhou in meetings with PDVSA, according to several PDVSA officials, and people in Venezuelan oil industry, implying the two men were the company's ultimate beneficiaries. Hangzhou also had other unusual and lucrative payment arrangements. Most oil buyers had to pay PDVSA in dollars. Hangzhou, however, paid Bandes, the development bank, in bolivars, the local currency, according to PDVSA documents, internal messages seen by the New York Times, and interviews with Venezuelan oil officials. The scheme defied the basic reason nations export oil: to obtain hard currency for imports. Venezuela's controlled currency rate meant that buying oil for undervalued bolivars and selling it to Chinese refiners for stable currency such as dollars would allow Hangzhou's owners to reap a huge profit. And Venezuela's runaway inflation meant that any bolivars that Hangzhou ended up depositing in Bandes, an opaque institution tied to Mr. Malpica, became practically worthless. Mr. Malpica's close relationship with Mr. Maduro and his wife helped him survive PDVSA's periodic purges, which have landed 4 of his recent presidents and dozens of executives in jail, including most of those who signed contracts with Hangzhou. Mr. Malpica also managed to strike up a friendship over the years with Ms. Rodriguez, according to several people who know both of them well. This connection appears to have spared him thus far from the new president's house cleaning, which has led to dozens of Maduro relatives being fired or ostracized. Several oil businessmen close to Mr. Maduro have been detained since his capture, but so far none have been publicly charged with any financial crimes. The oil industry accountability website called Transparent Sovereignty, promised by Ms. Rodriguez in January today, displays a single entry. The website says that the government sold $300 million worth of fuel oil in March, which was used to increase the minimum wage. The website did not say who bought the oil or for how much. White House insists Iran war is over even while missiles fly. The White House is turning to rhetorical leaps as President Trump tries to put the biggest political crisis of his presidency behind him. When the ceasefire in the war with Iran went into effect a month ago, President Trump was pretty direct that if the Iranians failed to end their nuclear program or to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the bombers would be back in the air. If there's no deal, fighting resumes, he said, making it very clear this was just a pause. But it turns out, according to the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, that the war actually ended at some point after the ceasefire took hold, or so he told reporters at a news conference at the White House on Tuesday. The Operation Epic Fury is concluded, he said. We achieved the objective of that operation. The effort to reopen the strait, Mr. Rubio said, is entirely a defensive and humanitarian operation that would result in direct military exchanges with the Iranians only if U.S. ships come under fire. Later on Tuesday, Mr. Trump announced that he was pausing even that effort, which was only one day old and had succeeded in getting just a few ships freed for a short period of time, citing what he said was great progress toward an agreement with Iran. But he kept the American blockade in place, part of a strategy of maximum economic pressure. Still, Mr. Trump's suspension of the effort to guide ships out of the strait seemed to contradict the administration's stated position that it was intolerable for Iran to block an international waterway and that only the United States had the ability to force it open again. For the White House, the insistence that the war was over was the latest rhetorical leap in an effort to put a war that has created the greatest political crisis of Mr. Trump's presidency in the rearview mirror. But the mere proclamation does not make it true. Missiles were still flying. Both sides insist they control traffic in the waterway. And despite Mr. Rubio's declaration that the objectives of the war have been accomplished, they clearly have not. In the 38 days of intensive combat operations, the United States hit by the Pentagon's count, about 13,000 targets. But destroying targets was not the only point. Mr. Trump himself described his objectives in the early hours of February 28th when he told the country in a video he had recorded earlier that he had 5 major goals. The first, of course, was to ensure that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. But he went on to add that the United States had to destroy Iran's ballistic missiles and their launchers, sink its navy and its support of terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, and finally create the conditions for the Iranian people to topple their government. Your hour of your freedom is at hand, he said at the time. The Iranian Navy is clearly gone, as Mr. Trump often notes, but that is only one checked off the list. So far, Iran's nuclear stockpile has not been touched, and there is no agreement, at least yet, to ship it out of the country or to dilute it so that it cannot easily be used to manufacture weapons. While intelligence estimates differ, the U.S. assessment suggests that more than half of Iran's missiles and launchers survived. It is too early to tell about support of the proxy groups, which were shredded by Israeli attacks. And Mr. Trump has abandoned talk of changing the country's leadership, suggesting at one point that he never called for it. At other moments, he has maintained the regime change already happened, citing the emergence of a new supreme leader and other officials replacing those who were killed. To most Iran experts and many in the American intelligence agencies, that is a change of personnel. Nonetheless, both Mr. Trump and Mr. Rubio have many reasons to declare that epic fury ended at some undefined date in the recent past. Congress was getting increasingly restive about the War Powers Act, which demands a vote of approval by Congress after American troops are involved in combat for more than 60 days. His political base has fractured on the question of whether Mr. Trump has dispensed with his own promise to get America out of lengthy wars, and Mr. Trump delayed his trip to China once to make sure that the war was over, that the United States was victorious, and that the strait was open before he touched down in Beijing. That trip is now scheduled for next Wednesday. Mr. Trump's language has changed too, though even he has not gone so far as to declare that the operation is ended. He cannot quite seem to keep himself from describing the current situation as a war, even if he has begun to back away. Our country is booming now, despite the fact that we're in I call it mini-war, he said at a White House event for small business on Monday. In other speeches, he has interspersed the word war with other more benign descriptions. Attacking Iran was an excursion, he said. At another point, he described it as a detour, making it sound more like a weekend drive across the Middle East that hit some traffic. While it all sounds like politically convenient wordplay, any real declaration that the battle is over represents a fundamental change in strategy, even for a war in which the White House seemed to be making up its next move day by day. For the past 9 weeks, American military power and the prospect that it could resume was the leverage Mr. Trump celebrated as a steel behind negotiations. Nothing would focus Iranian minds, he suggested, like the prospect of further destruction. Indeed, when negotiations over the future of the nuclear program broke down in late February, the American bombing was designed to force Iran to make concessions. But the bombing campaign, while deadly and destructive, did not alter Iran's fundamental positions, at least yet, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' success at sealing off the strait, bottling up tankers and cargo ships, and sending oil and fertilizer markets into a frenzy changed the dynamic. Mr. Trump's frustration was clear. He threatened even heavier strikes and attacks on power plants if Iran refused to relent, lashing out with expletives on social media. The Iranians ignored it. Then a few days later, Mr. Trump warned, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. Then came the ceasefire. But Iran's restraint fell apart after Mr. Trump on Sunday announced a new operation to guide ships through the narrow strait on a pathway that had been declared free of mines. Iranian forces shot at the 2 ships the following day, but the missiles were intercepted by American forces. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said on Tuesday that since the ceasefire took effect, Iran had attacked U.S. forces more than 10 times, but that the attacks were all below the threshold of restarting major combat operations. General Kane added that defining the threshold was a political decision, meaning it was Mr. Trump's decision, and Mr. Trump pressed a few hours later to explain where he put that threshold, told reporters, "You'll find out because I'll let you know." They know what to do, he said of the Iranians. They know what not to do. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said on Tuesday morning that the new military effort to guide merchant vessels through the Strait of Hormuz should be understood as a completely separate enterprise and a temporary defensive effort. "We're not looking for a fight," said Mr. Hegseth, who only a few weeks ago was celebrating American firepower against Iran and urging maximum lethality. But he noted the U.S. warships shot down cruise missiles and drones that Iran fired at the ships and commercial vessels, and that Army Apache helicopter gunships also sank 6 Iranian military speedboats that threatened the vessels. Mr. Rubio compared the boats to Boston whalers, small, ambiguous speedboats. He said those that were struck sit at the bottom of the sea, along with the rest of Iran's navy. Now the administration has moved from declaring that military strikes would change Iran's leaders to insisting that it is really economic cutoffs that will do the trick. Mr. Rubio said that the United States was now cutting off revenue that keeps together whatever remains of their frail economy. And he called the Iranians pirates. You can't have a situation in which the straits are closed to everyone else, but they benefit from the piracy. That can't happen, he said. Only the United States, he said, had the power to open the Strait of Hormuz as a favor to the world. Frankly, we are the only ones that can, he said. If we live in a world where a rogue state like this Iranian regime is allowed to claim as a new normal control over an international shipping lane, he added, it will not be long before you see that happen in multiple shipping lanes around the world. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. This Trump proposal opinion could result in millions of Americans losing their retirement savings. Pressed by his Wall Street supporters, President Trump is moving to liberalize the types of investments Americans can make with their individual retirement accounts. Instead of betting their retirement savings on plain vanilla stocks and bonds, account holders would be allowed to move their funds into sexy sectors like private equity, private credit, and cryptocurrency, no matter their complexity, risk, and illiquidity. Supporters of the switch make the case that individuals should have the same access to private assets with potentially higher returns as institutions and the wealthy. But this argument rests on the false premise that most Americans are equipped to evaluate these complex, opaque investments. They are not, and expanding access to them risks doing more harm than good. All in all, the proposal put forth by the Labor Department to fulfill a recent Trump executive order is a consequential mistake. It could well exacerbate the challenges already posed by individual retirement accounts, a flawed replacement for the traditional corporate pension plans that many Americans used to enjoy. At their core, today's retirement accounts turn everyday Americans into money managers, faced with a dizzying array of choices for how to invest their money. What is an Allspring Special Mid-Cap Value Fund, Class R6, or a Vanguard FTSE Social Index Fund, Admiral Class? Both are among the many mystifying choices in my 401k plan. I don't know how a salesman or doctor or even an accountant could successfully sift through every flavor of stock and bond funds like the aforementioned two, let alone navigate the bewildering world of alternative investments. I've been a professional investor for decades and am still daunted by the challenges. The obstacles are even greater for those who try to boost their retirement returns by betting on individual stocks or other single investments. In 2024, the average stock retail investor earned about 16.5%, picking mutual funds compared to 25% for the S&P 500, according to a study by Dalbar, a leading independent expert. In other words, most investors would have achieved markedly better performance by just putting their savings into an index fund designed to track the performance of the S&P 500. If individuals have so much trouble parsing ordinary stocks, imagine them trying to untangle a private equity fund offering. Faced with this incomprehensible menu of choices, many rely on a financial advisor, but conflicts abound with many traditional stockbrokers, often pushing particular products that are often more remunerative to their employer. And how even to pick a financial advisor, Barron's recently published a list of 1,500 favored ones. The other significant problem with individual retirement accounts is that they eliminate the social insurance aspect of traditional pension plans. Under the old regime, retirees didn't have to worry about how long they might live. Their pension benefit would steadily arrive in their bank accounts month after month. Now the elderly must make tough decisions about how to parcel out their assets. Use the money too quickly and they might become impoverished. Spending it too slowly could mean unnecessary reductions in their standard of living. Already, personal finance columns are peppered with headlines like, "Even rich retirees fear outliving their money," and record numbers of Americans are raiding their 401k savings. In theory, the Trump-supported proposal has one benefit. It could modestly ameliorate the fact that the current system works far better for the wealthy than for those further down the economic ladder. Again, that presupposes that individuals will be able to pick through the many offerings, which will come with exceptionally high fees. Numerous other problems remain. Many studies have shown that lower income workers save less and borrow or withdraw money more often than the rich. They also have less of the financial sophistication needed to make sound investment decisions. According to Federal Reserve data, the average retirement account balances of Americans in median households by income have barely budged after adjusting for inflation since the late 1980s, while Americans in the top 10% have seen their retirement account more than quintuple in value. But the answer isn't to invite Americans to dabble in private equity, private credit, and cryptocurrency. Other countries have done better at protecting their retirees without such risky schemes. Australia, for instance, requires participation in national retirement funds that are managed professionally on behalf of its account holders. Australia has socked away $3 trillion in these funds, about $110,000 per citizen. So what to do in the United States? At the very least, individuals should work with a registered investment advisor who is only compensated by their investors. You may think that those fees cost you money, but with the right advisor, your retirement savings are likely to end up larger. While I am not arguing for trying to turn back the clock to the old days, I do believe we need an ambitious rethinking of the architecture of our retirement system. We've had a little tinkering recently. Secure 2.0, passed in the Biden administration, made a couple of important improvements, like mandating that employers automatically enroll workers in retirement plans. Last week, Mr. Trump signed an executive order that would create individual retirement accounts for workers who lack employer plans and use the Savers Match from Secure 2.0 to contribute $1,000 in federal matching funds to those with lower incomes. These improvements only address a sliver of the gaps. Our system should require contributions from employers and employees managed by public-private partnerships. We need truly universal coverage for everybody, including gig workers, part-time workers, and small businesses. We need to incentivize and improve those annuities which offer set benefits for a retiree's life in order to protect individuals against outliving their savings. And we must strengthen Social Security. It is the only large program that guarantees seniors a fixed monthly payment until they die, but it is expected to become insolvent in just another 6 years. That means raising taxes to shore it up. And rather than encourage average Americans to sink their money into private equity funds and other exotic investments, we should allow the Social Security Administration to hire experts who will help it make those investments. As it stands, it is stuck investing only in low-yielding treasuries. Economic dignity in old age should be a promise, not a luxury. Hantavirus cruise ship remains at sea as leaders clash over its docking. 3 people with possible symptoms of the disease were evacuated on Wednesday morning from the Dutch-flagged MV Hondius. With the MV Hondius sailing the Atlantic in the grip of a deadly virus outbreak, its passengers are putting on movies, sanitizing their hands repeatedly, and awaiting their next socially distanced meal. The nearly 150 people on board were practicing the kind of rigorous hygiene familiar from the coronavirus pandemic, while the crew frequently cleans handrails and other high-contact surfaces. They were hunkered down on board as officials in Spain on Wednesday laid out a contentious plan to receive the ship in the Canary Islands this week over the objections of local leaders. Monica Garcia, the Spanish health minister, said during a news conference on Wednesday that the Hondius will sail in the coming days from near the West African nation of Cape Verde to a port in Tenerife, one of Spain's Canary Islands. From there, she said passengers would be repatriated if they were medically fit to travel. Fernando Clavijo, who leads the regional government of the Canary Islands, objected to the ship docking there, though his government could do little to prevent it. There is no information that justifies why the vessel must sail for 3 days to the Canary Islands, Mr. Clavijo said in a radio interview. Spain's central government, which has authority over its ports and the handling of potential infections from overseas, was clear that the ship was coming. "We are not going to get into the political controversy. I believe it's not the time," Ms. Garcia said during the news conference in response to Mr. Clavijo's comments. Since April 11, 3 passengers who were aboard the Hondias have died, and 5 other people have been sickened after showing symptoms of hantavirus, a rare family of viruses carried by rodents, according to the World Health Organization. On Wednesday morning, 3 people aboard the ship, 2 with acute symptoms of the disease, were evacuated on 2 medical flights to the Netherlands, according to the Dutch Foreign Ministry. The evacuees, including the ship's doctor, a 56-year-old Briton, and a 41-year-old Dutch citizen who also worked on the ship, according to the Spanish officials, and Oceanwide, the Dutch company operating the cruise. The third evacuee was a 65-year-old German passenger who had been in close contact with one of the people who died. At this stage, the overall public health risk remains low. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General of the WHO, said on social media. The MV Hondias departed from Argentina in early April with and about 150 passengers and crew members. Antarctica, the Falkland Islands, South Georgia Island, Nightingale Island, Tristan da Cunha, St. Helena, and Ascension were among the planned stops on its route. After the outbreak began, the ship headed to Cape Verde, where officials did not allow passengers to disembark. Those on board were doing their best to keep busy, some watching movies in their cabins, according to accounts from passengers in interviews and social media posts. Passengers are encouraged to practice social distancing and wear masks. For meals, they are told to sit in every other chair in the dining room and are encouraged to wash their hands regularly. Hand sanitizer dispensers have been placed around the ship, and the staffers are frequently cleaning handrails and other high-contact surfaces. Our days have been close to normal, just waiting for authorities to find a solution. But morale on the ship is high, and we're keeping ourselves busy with reading, watching movies, having hot drinks, and that kind of thing. Qasim Hatto, a Jordanian travel influencer who posts online as Ibn Hattuta, said in an email. The first fatality on the ship was a 70-year-old Dutch man who died while aboard. On April 11th, the man's 69-year-old wife became ill and died on April 26th in Johannesburg, South Africa, while attempting to fly home to the Netherlands. The third fatality was a German passenger who died on May 2nd. So far, the virus has been confirmed in 3 of the cases. The 69-year-old woman, another passenger who was taken to a hospital in South Africa, and a man in Switzerland who had disembarked the cruise and was receiving care in a hospital in Zurich. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases in South Africa said that the 3 confirmed cases involved the Andes virus, a type of hantavirus, which is primarily found in South America and is the only type known to spread among people. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. What happened when the Pope had to call customer service? Spoiler alert, there was no miracle. Even the Vicar of Christ can be thwarted by a customer service representative. About 2 months after Robert Francis Prevost, a Chicago-born cardinal, became Pope Leo in Vatican City, he put in a call to his bank back home. A close friend, the Reverend Tom McCarthy, told a gathering of Catholics in Naperville, Illinois last week. The new pope identified himself as Robert Prevost, saying that he wished to change the phone number and address that the bank had on file, Father McCarthy said. The pope dutifully answered the security questions correctly. Then the woman on the line for the bank told him it wasn't enough. He would have to come to the branch in person. He said, "Well, I'm not going to be able to do that." Father McCarthy said in a video clip shared on social media recounting the new pope's growing frustration as the audience laughed, "I gave you all the security questions." The bank employee apologized. The pope tried a different tack. "Would it matter to you if I told you I'm Pope Leo?" he asked, according to Father McCarthy. She hung up. Even while leading more than 1 billion Catholics around the world and living in gilded splendor amid priceless works of art, popes can sometimes be entangled in the mundane, both accidentally and with purpose. In the first 24 hours of Pope Francis's papacy in 2013, he insisted on paying his own hotel bill and collecting his own luggage, a gesture of humility to Catholic clergy. Pope Leo rose from modest roots in Dalton, Illinois, a small suburb just outside Chicago, before serving as a bishop in Peru and in an influential post at the Vatican, where he was elected pope nearly 1 year ago. Father McCarthy confirmed in an email that the story about the bank hassle was true. He had been telling a group of Catholics about his friendship with Pope Leo at an educational meeting geared toward men and boys at a Naperville church. The priest is a well-known figure among Catholics on the South Side, an Augustinian and leader at St. Rita of Cascia High School. He first met Pope Leo in the 1980s in Chicago, where they grew up in similar work-class neighborhoods in the city and its close suburbs, and has visited the Pope at the Vatican. A spokesman for the Vatican did not immediately return an email seeking comment on the bank episode. The matter was sorted out thanks to the intervention of another priest who had a connection to the bank president, Father McCarthy said. There was no word on the customer service representative who had cut off her call with the bank's most famous customer. Could you imagine being known as the woman who hung up on the Pope, Father McCarthy said. Democrats keep Michigan Senate majority with special election win. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat, allowed the swing district seat to sit vacant for more than a year as her party clung to a slim majority. Democrats held on to a narrow majority in the Michigan Senate on Tuesday by winning a special election in a closely divided district, the Associated Press said. The victory by Chedrick Green, a Saginaw firefighter, carried practical and symbolic importance for Michigan Democrats ahead of November's midterm elections, which include competitive races for governor and U.S. Senate. Mr. Green will take a seat vacated more than a year ago by Kristen McDonald Rivet, a Democrat who was elected to the U.S. House in 2024. The state Senate seat will be up for election again in November. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat, waited until last August to call the special election to replace Ms. McDonald Rivet, a delay that was criticized by Republicans and many political observers. The vacancy kept in place a one-seat Democratic majority in the state Senate, but also left residents of Bay City, Midland, and Saginaw without representation. Had the Republican nominee, Jason Tunney, won on Tuesday, the state Senate would have been locked in an even split, with the Democratic lieutenant governor carrying a tie-breaking vote. That deadlock would have had a limited effect, with control of state government already divided between a Democratic governor and a Republican House majority. Still, both parties were eager to demonstrate strength in a district northwest of Detroit that includes some of the most closely fought territory in statewide and presidential elections. Ms. McDonald Rivet won the district by 7 percentage points in 2022, a strong electoral year for Michigan Democrats. But Republicans have built political momentum in that region during the Trump era. The district is home to blue-collar workers who both parties covet, but who have drifted toward Republicans in recent elections. The district includes portions of 3 counties, all of which President Trump carried in 2024 as he narrowly won Michigan's electoral votes. Outside the polls, voters from both parties expressed disappointment about the state of the political discourse and deep distrust of the opposition. Matt Mitchell, a professor from Midland, said he voted for Mr. Green mostly because he did not want a Republican in office. The Republicans are destroying the country, said Mr. Mitchell, a Democrat who said he wanted to protect education and LGBTQ rights. Nelson Niederer, a Republican from Bay County, said after casting his ballot for Mr. Tooney that Republicans need to take control of the state Senate. Mr. Niederer, a retired boat builder, added, I realize I'm just one vote, but every vote counts, and we've got to stop Gretchen Whitmer in the last of her term here. Though Midland, home to the chemical company Dow, has steadily grown in recent decades, the cities of Saginaw and Bay City have suffered from manufacturing declines and shrinking populations. Saginaw, which grew up with the auto industry, has around 44,000 residents in the last census, down from 78,000 residents in 1980. Ms. Whitmer celebrated the result in a statement saying that voters put a check on Republican policies. Michiganders need relief right now, she said, and they know that Chedrick Green will help get that job done. Across the country, Democrats have performed well in special elections since Mr. Trump's second term began, flipping several seats that were previously held by Republicans. Those elections often have relatively low turnouts that draw heavily from the most engaged voters, and it is not yet clear whether those showings will translate in the November elections. With Ms. Whitmer to term limited, Democrats will have to beat both a Republican and an independent candidate, the former Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, in order to hold the governorship. State Senate Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson is seen as the likeliest Democrat nominee, while Representative John James has led in Republican primary polling. Both parties are also preparing for a competitive race for the U.S. Senate seat, being vacated by Senator Gary Peters, a Democrat. The Met Gala's embrace of Jeff Bezos causes a backlash. Protesters have found a perfect foil in Amazon's founder, the gala's lead sponsor this year. It is perhaps the world's most exclusive party, a spectacle of fashion and extravagance that draws a secretive roster of famous people, charges $100,000 a ticket, and drapes a carpet down the steps of one of Manhattan's oldest cultural institutions. But this year, the Met Gala is facing stiff headwinds, most notably for the decision to name Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder and one of the world's wealthiest men, and his wife Lauren Sanchez Bezos as honorary chairs. Opposition to the Bezoses started almost immediately after they were announced as financial sponsors in February, and comes amid a surging anti-rich sentiment nationwide and in New York City, the event's liberal home. The outrage seemingly gained momentum after the city's newly elected mayor, Zohran Mamdani, a democratic socialist, declared in mid-April that he would skip the gala, breaking with many of his predecessors, saying that his focus is on affordability. And in the weeks leading up to the event on Monday, an avid anti-Bezos campaign has erupted on New York streets, in subways, and online, where social media users have described the event as the Amazon Prime Gala or Bezos Ball. Reports of skittish stars and upset fashionistas have peppered tabloid pages, including rumors of some past guests steering clear. A guerrilla activist group called Everyone Hates Elon, a reference to another controversial billionaire, Elon Musk, has been calling for a boycott of the event, with a steady drumbeat of eye-catching campaigns around the city, including plastering posters on subway cars and bus stops. On Friday, in a nod to complaints by Amazon workers of having to skip bathroom breaks and urinate in bottles instead, the group placed close to 300 bottles of fake urine inside the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Then on Sunday, the eve of the gala, the anti-billionaire group projected video interviews with Amazon workers onto the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, and the Bezos' penthouse near Madison Square Park. "If you can buy the Met Gala, you can pay more taxes," read one of the projections beamed from the back of a van, along with a picture of a laughing Bezos. Some people stopped and snapped photos, while others simply chuckled. "What does Jeff Bezos?" asked one passerby, Mayan Rajandran, have to do with fashion? He wasn't the only one asking that question. Other critics have included past boosters like Blakely Thornton, an influencer who interviewed celebrities on the red carpet last year. This year, Thornton skewered the gala on Instagram, criticizing the decision to align with Bezos, adding in a text message that he would rather be dragged through broken glass than participate in this oligarch-orchestrated clown show. The gala, which dates to 1948, acts as a fundraiser for the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute and ushers in its major spring exhibition, with this year's focus on the dressed body. The fashion house Saint Laurent is sponsoring the exhibition catalog. Designers are known to spend months preparing outfits for the famed guests, who are often in surreal and spectacular fashion. Fern Mallis, the creator of the New York Fashion Week, called the Met Gala the biggest ball of the year, whose influence has far outgrown its roots as an event for well-heeled philanthropists and patrons who lived nearby and loved the museum and were often escorted by the designers they wore. Now, she said, it's really about the celebrities and the musicians and the athletes and all these cultural icons of the day, but she thought that much of this starry guest list had little connection with the museum itself. "I'll bet many of them have never even been there," she said. In recent years, too, protests have become as commonplace as the carnivalesque swirl surrounding the event, with demonstrations focused on issues like the war in Gaza or climate change. In 2024, the gala drew rebukes from lawmakers for naming TikTok as a sponsor at a time when the social media giant was facing a potential ban in the United States amid allegations of its political entanglements with China. In Bezos, however, progressive protesters have seemingly found a perfect foil, a singular figurehead whose rightward political drift, $250 billion bankroll, and anti-union efforts have made him an object of scorn on the left. He obviously is one of the great avatars for, just endless, rapacious accumulation of wealth and exploitation of workers at the expense of the rest of us, said Micah Utrecht, the editor of Jacobin, a socialist magazine. So kudos to them, he said, of the Met Gala organizers. If they were looking to make the worst choice possible, it seems like they've succeeded. The Bezos' unapologetic embrace of the luxe life, including a $50 million wedding last summer in Venice with a $500 million yacht bobbing nearby, have not helped their image in some quarters either. It's not like a situation of the quiet rich. John Ryan Nish, a veteran Democratic political strategist, said, "This is the loud rich, and in a populist moment that creates tension." Both the Metropolitan and representatives for the Bezos declined to comment. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Is self-tanner bad for you? Sunless tanning products are billed as safer than tanning in the sun. We asked experts if they come with any health risks of their own. Question: I use sunless tanning products to avoid ultraviolet exposure, but many of them have scary-sounding ingredients. Is self-tanner safe? A far cry from the orange spray tans of yore, today's sunless tanning products can produce a deep and realistic glow, which is probably why they have become so popular. According to one market research firm, revenues from self-tanning products sold in the United States were expected to increase by about 44% between 2021 and 2030. There's no question that sunless tanning is safer than outdoor or indoor tanning, as the latter two undoubtedly increase the risk of skin cancer. The decision between deliberately exposing your skin to ultraviolet radiation and using a sunless tanner for a faux glow is a no-brainer, said Dr. Whitney Bowe, a dermatologist in New York. But research on the safety of these products is woefully lacking, as is true for many skincare products in the United States. Few, if any, studies have rigorously assessed their safety in humans, said Dr. Henry Lehm, a dermatologist in Detroit. That said, self-tanners have been used without serious known health risks for decades, he said, so they are assumed to be safe. Still, there are some important considerations to keep in mind. What scientists know: most sunless tanning products contain the active ingredient dihydroxyacetone, or DHA, a simple carbohydrate that was studied in the 1920s as a treatment for diabetes. Researchers later noticed that when people accidentally spilled or coughed up DHA, it darkened the skin. That's because DHA interacts with dead skin cells, releasing a brown color that makes the skin look tanned, often for several days. Some sunless tanning products also contain erythrose, an active ingredient that can help the tan last longer, but most products contain only DHA. The Food and Drug Administration approved the use of DHA as a cosmetic color additive in sunless tanning products in 1973. That designation requires far less safety data than is needed for drug or food approval, especially when the additive does not penetrate deeply into the skin, as research suggests is the case for DHA. While some laboratory studies on isolated skin cells have found that when DHA is applied directly to the cells, it can produce free radicals and other molecules that have been associated with cellular damage, premature aging, and cancer, those studies used concentrations higher than what is found in sunless tanning products. No human studies have conclusively ruled out the possibility that if used regularly, the products could age the skin or increase the risk of cancer, said Natalie Gassman, an associate professor of medical and cellular pathology at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. But there isn't reason to think that they would when used as directed. Research suggests that most of the DHA from sunless tanning products stays on the skin's dead cells and doesn't reach living cells, said Dr. Dara Spearman, a dermatologist in Fort Wayne, Indiana. In rare instances, sunless tanning products can irritate the skin or cause allergic reactions, Dr. Spearman said. She added that the products could also clog pores and exacerbate acne in acne-prone people. How to use self-tanner safely. DHA-containing products have only been approved for external use, so they shouldn't be inhaled, ingested, or applied near delicate areas such as eyes, lips, nostrils, or genitals. To avoid inhaling or ingesting these products, use foams or creams rather than sprays, Dr. Spearman said. If you do use a spray, apply it to your palms first and then spread it over your body, Dr. Lim suggested. You can also apply it outside or near an open window. If you have sensitive skin or eczema, apply the product to a small patch of skin first and wait 24 to 48 hours, Dr. Spearman said. If there's no reaction, you can apply it more broadly. Don't apply sunless tanning products to broken or irritated skin, as that may cause uneven tanning or exacerbate your injury, Dr. Spearman added. If you're pregnant or nursing, it's best to consult your doctor before using sunless tanning products, she said. After sunless tanning, Dr. Bowe said it's still important to use a broad-spectrum sunscreen with SPF 30 or higher and to wear sun-protective clothing and seek shade. Dr. Bowe said she wished that people didn't feel the need to darken their skin, but if she had to choose between deliberately exposing skin to UV to chase a tan versus using a sunless tanner, she said, I'm firmly in camp sunless tanner. Foggy brain? Maybe it's your gut. Scientists keep learning more about the connection between the brain and gastrointestinal system. Dr. Kylie Stoller is a gastroenterologist, so it may be surprising that many of his patients come to him complaining not only about stomach trouble, but about their brains too. Irritable bowel syndrome and other digestive dysfunction can be accompanied by a mental haze. People experiencing constipation and bloating, for example, may describe a sense of heaviness or being weighed down, both physically and mentally, said Dr. Stoller, who works at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. So many of my patients talk about problems like fatigue, brain fog, and feeling sluggish, he added. Scientists are making progress in understanding how the pathway between the brain and the digestive system influences our overall health. They call it the gut-brain axis, and it has been shown to play a big role in immune system support, anxiety, depression, metabolism, and disease prevention. It can also affect mental clarity. We asked scientists and clinicians what to know about the gut and brain fog. How does the gut-brain axis work? There are thousands of fibers running from the brain to the abdomen that are known as the vagus nerve. It is a primary conduit of the gut-brain axis. And as the main nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system, it helps the body rest, digest, and deter inflammation. Signals also travel back and forth between the gut and the brain via stress hormones and immune cells. Crucially, gut bacteria produce chemical messengers called neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA that affect the nervous system. When they enter the bloodstream or stimulate the vagus nerve, they can help improve mood, drive motivation, and calm the nervous system. This constant communication keeps the body systems in balance. How are digestive issues connected to brain fog? Brain fog is the result of bad connections between the gut and the brain, said Gerard Clark, a professor of neurobehavioral science at the University College Cork in Ireland, who studies the effects of gut bacteria on the brain and behavior. Some causes of digestive problems are also associated with brain fog, including poor nutrition, hormonal changes associated with menopause, anxiety, and infection. In addition, autonomic nervous system dysfunction, and umbrella term for various disorders that make it difficult for the body to control heart rate, blood pressure, and temperature can cause digestive problems and brain fog, Dr. Stoller said. It's not entirely clear how digestive dysfunction leads to brain fog. For some people with digestive problems like irritable bowel syndrome, the nerves in the gut become increasingly sensitive. As the gut sends distress signals to the brain, these alerts intensify. It's similar to a microphone placed too close to a speaker, Dr. Stoller said. Small signals get feedback, amplified, and quickly become overwhelming. That can make problems like gas or bloating feel excruciating and ultimately distracting, possibly leading to brain fog, he added. A study published in October found that more than half of the 100 participants experienced brain fog alongside IBS or gastroparesis, a chronic condition where the stomach has difficulty emptying its contents into the small intestine. What role does the microbiome play? The gut microbiome is composed of trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that inhabit your intestinal tract. A diverse microbiome helps protect us from disease, decrease inflammation, and help produce and regulate the neurotransmitters that affect our mood and brain function. Signals from our microbes can affect many of the brain regions associated with fogginess, Dr. Clark said. These include the hippocampus, which is responsible for learning and memory, the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with decision-making and clarity of thought, and the amygdala, which is the brain central hub for processing fear and anxiety. Sometimes, the experts said, our microbiome gets out of whack because of problems related to diet, stress, lack of sleep, or exercise, medications, menopause, infection, or chronic inflammation. One type of imbalance in the gut's microbial community is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, which can cause bloating and diarrhea. In a small 2018 study of about 40 people, researchers found a connection between brain fogginess and SIBO among patients who were taking probiotics. Patients' symptoms improved after they took antibiotics and stopped probiotics. Rather than colonizing in the colon, the probiotics instead congregated in the small bowel and produced too much D-lactic acid, which is difficult for humans to metabolize, said Dr. Satish Rao, a gastroenterologist and professor of medicine at Augusta University in Georgia, who was the lead author of the paper. When it accumulates, you become foggy, he added. Some people assume that taking probiotics is helpful for digestion, especially after a course of antibiotics. While probiotics have been shown to help in certain contexts, there isn't currently enough scientific evidence to support widespread use, the experts said. Will improving gut health reduce mental fogginess? Possibly. Scientists haven't uncovered a specific way to target brain fog via the gut, but working to maintain a healthy gut can support a clearer mind. To do this, eat healthy food that support your gut microbes. Dr. Clark said microbes rely on fiber as an important source of nutrients, so try foods that are rich in fiber like vegetables, beans, nuts, and whole grains. It also helps to add more fermented foods to your diet like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, and kimchi. Megan Reel, a psychologist at the University of Michigan who specializes in gastrointestinal disorders and other digestive conditions, suggested also getting enough sleep, doing moderate exercise, and trying a gentle diet cleanup, for example, limiting your consumption of caffeine, alcohol, and low-fiber, ultra-processed foods. Dr. Stallo also endorsed good nutrition. Healthy plant-based diets will likely continue to show benefit and stand the test of time over the fads that come and go. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 6th issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Claudia, and I thank you for listening.